What is your home forming you into? Whether we realize it or not, the ordinary moments of our day are shaping our marriages, our children, and even our relationship with God. But in a world that is constantly pulling our attention elsewhere, those moments can quietly slip away. When was the last time you sat down with your family without feeling rushed to the next thing, without looking at your phone, and simply enjoyed being together? Today, we're talking about what it means to build an intentional household and why those ordinary moments matter more than we realize, and a few simple shifts that can help us create homes filled with deeper relationships, greater peace, and the kind of life that we were created for. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Persistence in Prayer podcast hosted by Catholic wife, mother, mindset coach, and spiritual director, Kylie Hine. Kylie is passionate about helping you deepen your relationship with God through the power of prayer. This podcast is a space for Catholic women who feel pulled in a million directions, but still long to prioritize their spiritual lives. Join us as we explore the beauty of persistence in prayer and the impact it can have on our everyday lives. Here you'll discover practical tips, honest conversations, and encouragement to help you grow in prayer, trust God more deeply, and live with greater peace and clarity. As we invite the Holy Spirit in, let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Persistence in Prayer. Today, I am joined by John Cuddeback. He has been a professor of philosophy at Christendom College for 30 years. He lectures and writes on how to live the good life today. His first book, True Friendship, and his new book, The Intentional Household, are published by Ignatius Press. His work at Lifecraft is renowned for applying a timeless wisdom to life of today. And I love that in here you talk about the good life because I'm in Nebraska, and that's kind of our motto is the good life.
Good. All right.
John, it's so nice to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Kylie. Great to be here. I love talking about these things, so I'm very excited.
Well, your book that we're going to discuss today is about the intentional household. And so before we dive into that, I'm curious, did this stem from what was going on in your own household and what you saw in other people's households? Can you kind of give us a little bit of background of how you grew up, maybe some things that were good or not so great, and then what you saw as you transitioned into your own parenthood and your own marriage?
Sure. So it's funny. I think you know exactly what someone's asking, and then they just turn it a little bit in a great way. And I thought you can also say, or is it coming from what you teach at the college? I was going, well, this is perfect. This is just a both. So philosophy professor, have had great teachers, reading great wise people for a very long time. So I have a great opportunity to teach beautiful things in the classroom. What goes on in my own life is a big part of what kind of focuses my interest on what I teach in the classroom. It's always been about the good life for me, but in kind of different emphases. And first, it was friendship. And then, very naturally, growing out of friendship was this emphasis of the household. Of course, very much because this was my life. Blessed with 6 children. And now, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, it seems I've got 9 grandchildren, still have my youngest 2 children at home. So life is very full. But my wife and I have been talking about these things for years, trying to do them. And then there's teaching it in the classroom. So the book is very much, first of all, a product of both of those. You asked about my household of origin. Great question. I think I, like many, am very grateful, but also recognize, and this comes in different people in different degrees, how, first of all, we're just in a different age now with different challenges. And I dare say, in certain ways, more dramatic challenges. So you just kind of realize, yeah, we need intentional parents that are moving at a level of reflectiveness and focus that just wasn't quite so necessary before. And of course, we try to focus on gratitude for our house of origin, but at the same time, there's definitely things there that I realized I could have used this or I could have used that. And that certainly is also part of how I think about these things. I've now been blessed to be around generations of young people in college. And while that can be perhaps deforming in certain ways, it also really gives a great angle onto kind of where young people are today. So when people normally ask me, where's the book come from? I say, I see a lot going on out there. I see the astounding challenges in certain ways, unlike anything I think families have ever faced. And we have to realize what this means to live in a culture of death. We have to be very realistic about the challenges. And then on the other side, I see so many people, especially young people getting married, who want something different. And maybe they're like me, they're grateful for certain things in their upbringing, but they realize certain things they really would have wanted to be a little bit different, or they realize they need to up the ante now, but they're not quite sure how to do it. They're looking for principles, they're looking for examples. How often do I hear, I just don't know what this would look like? I haven't seen anything like what, in some sense, I know I want, but I'm not exactly sure what I want looks like. This book, I think, speaks to many people right in kind of where their hearts are. What do we do? How do we think about and then how do we enact the homes that we know God wants us to have?
Yeah. So I'm hearing it's like we know what we desire. The desire is there. We can maybe even articulate the desire. But in the culture that we live in, it's like, how is that even possible?
Yeah,
I've never
yeah,
seen
yeah.
it. I don't know how to get it. There's all of these other obstacles that are in the way for me to try to get there. So just to kind of rewind a little bit, how did we get to this place where we are? How did this dismantling of the household kind of occur and what does it look like?
Great question. That's really, we have to be aware of certain of the historical features here. And we can talk about how we got here historically, and we could also emphasize the philosophical aspects. Let me say something quick about both. I mean, all problems are always, of course, from a rejection of God and a rejection of his plan. So if we just follow God's plan, we don't have problems. Doesn't mean it's easy, but we don't have problems. We as a society, as a civilization, have been turning away from God's plan for life for many, many generations. And one way of putting that is just look at what we consider to be success in kind of the good life. And we have to recognize, even those of us who have the faith very strongly, this is affecting us in ways that we don't realize. I love a line from Aristotle: a society will produce the kind of people that it honors.
Mm.
This really gives you pause. It's not accidental that our society tends to produce the people that are kind of bent upon achieving certain things that are what are now commonly called success. Well, those are the people we praise. And so those are the people that young people want to be. Our hierarchy of values of goods is out of order. The household lived according to God's plan is a bastion of right order. It's a bastion of putting first things first. So, the title of the book, The Intentional Household, subtitle, Living as If People Matter. This is not a throwaway line. Living as if people matter is a very serious point where it is an expression of an insight that was already there by natural reason, but Christianity very strongly, that the greatest good in life is to achieve a certain character, is to live in certain kinds of relationships according to God's plan. The household is the place where this is most obviously done in a daily way. We have rejected that for a mess of pottage. We have given up our birthright for something that's very glitzy and very appealing and hard to resist, particularly the way that it's constantly served up for us. But this notion of success that we now move towards, that moved us away from the household. So, in various ways, now there's so many forces, I call them centrifugal forces, literally fleeing the center of the household, constantly being pulled away. Men were first pulled away. Women, in various ways, are being pulled away. Our children are being pulled away. And so, how did we get here? I mean, we've rejected God's plan. We have put the wrong things first. And so now we have the common practices, customs of our day are against having real, vital, vibrant, joyful presence in the home. And it's hard to get that back without being very intentional and having a real sense of what that can and should look like.
You talk about in your book how, in order to, with things rightly ordered, people come before things. And I think that Aristotle quote that you gave so perfectly hits that. I was a middle school and high school math teacher for 13 years, and you're in education too. So you know that educators in the US are not always supported in the way that they need supported. And a lot of
Yeah.
times we're very focused as a culture on the outcomes. What are student test grades? How are they going to perform? All of these things. We're not looking at the whole person. even when we look at children, the question we often ask them, and I think of this with my own kids, it's what do you want to do when you grow up, right? It's not what kind of person do you want to be.
Right. Sure.
And the focus is on the performance, the outcome. And you have a quote in your book. You say, "We overvalue our profession, usually at the expense of our own home life. And this is a failure to put people first." So, one of the reasons I started this podcast was because I went through a very long season of feeling way overextended, way disconnected. And I didn't even realize how bad it was until I was finally out of it because I was struggling with the demands of my work, teaching, bringing home all the grading, handling parent emails, all the expectations of the school. I was also coaching because in order to live on a teacher salary, often you have all these extra duties, helping with clubs, helping with sports activities.
Hmm.
And I knew my family needed me, but I was constantly having to choose. And this was what was difficult. It was choosing between people, right? There were the people at my work and there were those expectations. And it was like, well, I knew my family would be more forgiving. So often they were the ones that got neglected. And I'm curious if you can kind of give some insight into that. When we start noticing these things, what do we do to kind of pull back and bring our attention back to our household without feeling guilty about these other things that we also
Yeah.
feel responsible for?
Yeah. Wow. That's a hard one. And very often, thinking about these things and being with people where we're thinking about these things together, sometimes when someone asks a question, this kind of one of those really foundational ones. Well, how do I get the right balance between X and Y? And I often think to myself, well, yeah, I mean, like, there's one of the great life questions. And I like to start by saying the good news is this: it's very important to be asking the right question. And because that's already to be part way there. If we're asking the right question with the right spirit, we realize that we're going to have to really attend to this. And so, even the way you expressed that obviously was coming from a deeply felt experience of, wait a second, I'm not kind of getting things in order. I'm overextended and I'm making a little bit of a mistake, a very understandable one. And it's not something to beat oneself up over. But I think that's a key thing is I hear that kind of thing very often. And I've done it as a parent myself. Even another example among children, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That come to find out, there's this child over here that wasn't causing trouble, but but I too much expected or assumed everything's fine and didn't give kind of the attention that still was needed. So there's obviously no magic formula here other than Socrates' great line: we need to live as though what's most important is most important. And someone looking at our life from the outside should be able to see by our life what our scale of values are. Because very often the problem is we know in our mind that serving God is most important. That doesn't mean that we're actually enacting that. And so we need to see that in God's plan, when we get married, we sign up to take responsibility for a household. A household is a community of daily life with persons here that is my first responsibility to attend to. Now, extraordinary circumstances can bring where the common good demands that someone goes out. It's important to recognize a man might be called away to serve his country and have to leave his family behind because the broad common good absolutely demands that. Okay, so we have to recognize that can happen. But in the normal course of things, the way that we serve the common good, the way that we serve the church, is by giving our first attention to those that clearly in God's plan need our first attention. If I'm married to my spouse and my children. And so we keep asking ourselves, am I ordering my life in my day so that I am first attending to them? And if anything is genuinely taking me away from that, not just making it hard, but is genuinely taking me away from it, then I need to reorder. And that shows up in the concrete aspects of life that go through there and the principles. I think this is where the book is going to be helpful. We've lost those contexts in the home that are the ways that we naturally do connect with those ones we need to prioritize. But it's so easy to miss, especially given that those practices, those activities aren't there. They're not common anymore. That's sitting around the piano and singing, that's sitting around the fire, that's sitting on the porch and chatting together. How we doing, Kylie?
I just think hearing this takes me back, right? I don't know how many times I heard wife and mother first. And it wasn't until I was on a retreat and had a spiritual direction session. And she reminded me, your first vocation is as a wife and a mother. And so it's just like you said, what is the most important thing? And it wasn't until that moment that it really clicked for me. It's like, okay, I am prioritizing these other children who are very much important. And we have a responsibility to help build them up as well. But if at some point it is pulling me from my vocation as a wife and a mother, then there's a problem. And if I'm not able to give anything to my husband, then things are disordered. And so it's like we can hear it, but we have to be open to receiving that message for it to really click and to apply it, which is kind of what I love about the book because you have the philosophical aspect of it, right? All the
Mhm.
thinking parts, the reasoning parts, which are important. But then you also talk about the application of now, what do I do with that? What is my responsibility? What are ways that I can incorporate this knowledge into my life?
Mhm, mhm. Kylie, and let me I really appreciate everything you just said right there, and let me just say right out, because these are hard things these days, and there's a lot of voices out there. I am not that guy that just says, "Look, the traditional view, woman simply has to be in the home kind of period while man is out there doing other things, and woman simply has to hold down the fort." You can understand why someone might use all the words that I just used, but it's much more nuanced than that. I am far from a perfect husband. By the grace of God, I have learned a ton from my wife. My wife is one of those women that just kind of exemplifies she wants to do so much.
Mm.
And so in some, it's more this way than others. There's always that kind of tension. How do you bring together? How do you put in order when she so much wants to be able to do this out there and exercise this talent? You didn't ask to talk about this, but I mean, it was going on, and what you were saying is, let's just say something, and we can leave it. We can talk more about it. I'll enunciate a couple things I think have to be kept in the right tension. First of all, I want to say a big theme of mine is the wife and children must be the central priority for the husband too.
Mm.
Household is a shared project. When a man asks a woman to marry him, and it is of nature that he asks, what is this project that he should have somewhat in his mind when he comes in and says, will you marry me? He's inviting her to join him in a project that he has to take first responsibility for today and always. He has to take first responsibility and say, I will always be with you in crafting this good life together, or crafting this astounding thing that today is so threatened, that today is so undermined, is so pulled apart. We are going to have to work together and properly together both prioritize this. I, as the husband, might be gone more. I probably will be gone more because another principle is, especially when we're blessed with children. The children have by the way, you're welcome to, I'm going to repeat that so you can disagree or whatever after I say it. God's plan is made known by the needs of people. The needs of children call especially for the more consistent bodily presence of the mother. And so it's of nature that there is an asymmetry. You can't just switch and replace one for the other. There is this greater need for the mother to be bodily present for children. This is why, traditionally, to the extent that someone needs to go out, it is going to be the husband. But that's not in this very modern sense of woman takes care of the home and dad goes and earns bread out there. That is a definitive perversion. We have to keep a real distinction between roles where the mother has this unique, irreplaceable kind of primary place, especially when the children are young, in kind of being that heart of the home, being that bodily presence for the children. But the husband very much involved, very much taking responsibility, also very much making that be possible, very much being bodily present himself too, even while he has to go out and pursue a profession that is ultimately to empower him to make this household be the flourishing place it can be. Does that sound reasonable, Kylie?
That sits
Okay.
really well with me. And actually, you were talking about the woman who has all these desires and wants to hold all these things. And I just kept thinking of Saint Therese. I can't remember the list of all the things. She was like, I wanted to be a priest and I wanted to be a missionary, right? There were all of these things that she desired. But ultimately, there was also a mission in there that Christ had put on her heart that was more prominent. And
Mhm.
if we just let all of these kind of shiny, flashy, fun ideas come to the forefront and we try to chase them all, they're distractions and they keep us from our true purpose. So that going back, that reordering, that structure that you talk about of recognizing what is of nature. As a mother, if we have children at home, they have certain needs. And just like you said, I totally agree that there is a disproportion in what children need from their mothers and what they need from the fathers and the way that they react to the same situation with either parent, right? And so when we fight against that, that's when we get the anxiety and the worry and the frustration, I think, as women, instead of just embracing this beautiful way that God has created us to be in the world, to respond to the needs of the people around us. And that doesn't mean that we can't still have big dreams. I
Yes.
look at my own life and yeah, it's shifted. I'm not teaching in a classroom anymore. I'm not coaching athletics in the way that I was, but I am so much more at peace and I still have a job, I still work, but there's so much more time and energy to put into my own family, into my own home. And it's not
Mhm.
just more peaceful
Mhm.
for me, it's not just better for me, it's better for everyone in my family and everyone I encounter throughout the day because I have an inner sense of peace that then flows outward.
Amen. Amen. And I think, Kylie, this issue requires ongoing prayer, discernment, discussion. These root things, I like to say it's part of God's plan that it takes the ongoing conversation simply to figure out how to do it and to keep adjusting. God designed marriage and the family life and the household so that, especially the spouses, would have a ton to talk about and discern together and work through every day. The harder it gets, the more that's a call for them to deepen their own relationship precisely in and through having to figure this out. So we should never be discouraged that it's, quote, hard to get it right. Keep trying together to get it right. And that forges the deeper relationship. Point one. The second point I just want to throw out here is the notion that I am encouraging here of this kind of household that is full of life. And we can go into the details, especially a principle about having work in the home and a certain kind of leisure, because we need to give it flesh. I think my main contribution to this discussion is to give specificity to what are the things that should be going on in our home. Many, quote, traditional households are not realizing how their home still tends to be rather empty of life. And we need to discover those activities that are going to more be fulfilling a natural plan, giving the context for the personal growth, for the deepening of relationships. And it's there, especially, that then both the woman's and the man's role for making a household comes to light. What we've got to see here is central to why women struggle with, why would I be a homemaker? This isn't fulfilling. Central to why men have a sense of kind of, well, what would I do there? And alas, can have this kind of, even if not intentionally, kind of a looking, well, that's for my wife. And women tend to feel, what's the that, by the way? It's not, as it were, it's not good enough to deserve the attention of men. This has tended to be the pattern here. And so, in varying ways, in different kind of ways, both men and women are themselves kind of fleeing really investing in it because we don't know what the it is. We've lost the richness of that it. And so we don't want to invest in it. And the book is trying to give a richer sense, a much richer sense. Starts to paint a beautiful picture from another world that should be our world and can be our world, even in these challenging times, of what that vibrant life in the home that is the natural context for, first of all, marriage and for raising children, what it can really look like. And we can do it today by the grace of God.
And part of this intentional household I would say the foundation of it really is what you said. It's people, it's relationships. But relationships in our home, in the workplace, in our communities, in our extended family, this is really challenging in the world that we live in today. What are some of the obstacles that kind of get in the way of us building relationships today that maybe weren't there in the past?
And you know what? I'm going to go to that. I'm going to go to in giving the 8 principles that I give. The first 2 are broad. The first is make household making a priority, which means we have to have a sense of what this astounding daily community of life is and what the needs of human persons are that can be addressed there. The second one is very closely related. Take responsibility for it. And that means men and women in their own way. And in certain ways, that's especially trying to give men a sense of we have a crisis of responsibility in the workplace because we don't take responsibility at home. Home is the home of responsibility. People don't know how to take responsibilities because they're not being shown it, especially the parents, spouses, taking responsibility for life in the household. The next 2 principles are about work and leisure. And that is when you say kind of what's kind of the problem, what's working against the relationships. The main way I'd put it, Kylie, is we've lost the context. Here's a line from Wendell Berry I love. All living things need a conducive context if they're going to thrive. They need a context that's conducive to their thriving. We're going to learn countless things about life from the garden. Your plants will not thrive if you don't give them certain things. Our relationships only thrive when they have a conducive context for thriving. The household, in its traditional activities, is that context. But this is what people don't realize. Why do so many spouses struggle to get to know one another? We feel so torn apart. We feel like we don't get to intersect very much. This isn't natural and normal. It's a pressure of the age in which we live. It has undermined the normal structures in household where we would have had much more to do together. Allow me to just give you an image. It's a little bit of a stark one, but I think it's important. It so struck me, and I think it helps bring this point home. Wendell Berry at one point said in the 80s, he said, it seems the model for marriage has become this: man and woman do their own thing during the day and they sleep together at night. And that doesn't make a marriage. What does make a marriage? If you're just doing your own thing during the day and then intersecting a little bit and then sleeping in the same bed, that's not a formula for having a deep personal relationship. What does Wendell Berry point to? Something that almost sounds too easy or too ordinary or too old fashioned. You tell me what it sounds to. Making a household together is what give a husband and wife a shared life. That's the backbone. That's the context. So why are we having such trouble in our relationships? You ready to see that in spades? So I'm going to say something again that's kind of stark. I'm around young people all the time from many of the best families that you'll ever meet come to the institution in the office of which I'm sitting right now as we're having this conversation. And what do I see consistently? I am not emphasizing the negative, but we need to live in the truth so that we can move forward.
Mhm.
Young people are suffering from lack of relationship with their parents. And I'm saying this about children from very, very, very good families. I'm not pointing any fingers. I'll narrow in further, especially with their dads, especially with their dads. Why is this the case? This should not be so. It's not normal. It's just, oh, shucks, that's just the way human life is. No, it's very much a function of our eviscerated homes where children have so little opportunity for the richer natural context for intersection with their father. And so that's where I go to work, the traditional home arts, leisure, the way that we spend time together, lingering after a meal, lingering on the porch, walking together in nature, telling stories aloud. This was completely ordinary and it sounds like a fairy tale now, or it is only the fruit of very intentional activity. Sorry, Kylie, that was a long answer, but all that was to directly say, you said, why are we struggling in our relationships?
Mhm.
That's my answer, because we don't have that.
Hey, friend, I just want to pause for a second and say, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I know a lot of you listening are carrying so much, and you probably feel a little mentally scattered and stretched thin, or like you just can't ever quite do enough. And I want you to know that I see you and I understand, and there's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes all we need is a little space to breathe and to pray and to have someone listen so that we can get clear. And that is the biggest thing that I hear from clients when we are done meeting is that they feel lighter. They feel like they have a path forward. They feel more confident. And I just want to invite you to a free confidence and clarity call. There is absolutely no pressure. There's no obligation. I'm not going to sell you on anything. It's just a simple conversation because I want you to experience what that is like to have a safe space where you can be vulnerable and you can be seen. So, if that's something you're interested in, just click the link in the show notes and together we can talk through whatever's feeling heavy right now because we all deserve the chance to have the peace that God gives us. And sometimes we just need someone to help us see how to better protect that. There are so many things to unpack in what you just said, but I think just like you said, it all goes back to intentionality. And we see this not only in our relationships with other people, but our relationships with God, right? If I go through my whole day and I know
Mhm,
that God is there, He exists, I exist, we're both existing at the same time, but there's no interaction, then that's not a relationship that's coexisting. And it's very easy because we don't see God, we don't physically see him, right? Unless we are very intentional about having prayerful reminders. You can see a picture of Jesus behind me,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
To
mhm,
like call my mind and attention to him. And I practice that habit and I'm intentional about it. It would be very easy to go through my life very separate in terms of relations with the Lord, even though he is my creator. In terms with
mhm,
my spouse, and you could probably relate to this because I think I read in your book you guys raised hogs, but we have an acreage and we have cattle. And when the weather is nice, my husband spends a lot of time out there. Last night, he was moving hay bales till probably 9:30 at night. He came home, was able to tell the kids good night. But it would have been very easy. I get up earlier than him for me to just go to bed, for us to have no conversation. He gets up the next morning. I get up the next morning. We kind of go our separate ways. There are certain seasons where it would be very, very easy for our relationship to just disintegrate. And we have to be
mhm,
intentional about finding that time together. So I didn't see him very much last night. He called me this morning when he was driving somewhere for work so we could have a conversation. It's finding those ways to build that in, which is what I'm hearing from you. And one of those pieces to make that happen is you said leisure. I want to unpack that a little bit because the word leisure can mean different things to different people. But in this context, you're
mhm.
talking about leisure is not the same as amusement. Can you tell us more about what leisure really means?
Love to. This is where good philosophy is really critical. It's more critical than ever because our culture is so contrary. Our customs have so abandoned what in the past would have enshrined this. It wasn't so important that you'd be able to articulate such a thing because practices of good leisure were there. But now we're going to have to be intentional this new way. Well, okay, leisure, well, what is it? Leisure, this goes all the way back to Aristotle. Leisure is activity that has its meaning within itself. It's not about producing something outside of it. It's something, in a sense, that's done for its own sake. The highest kind of human activities are come under this aspect of leisure. They're not work. Work is beautiful. Work has great dignity. That's absolutely essential. Good work, true leisure are two sides of the beautiful coin that is human life. But it's leisure, and Joseph Pieper, the great Thomistic philosopher of the 20th century, was a master of pointing this out. He had a famous book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture. And what he's saying there is, because this comes from Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, if you don't have a sense of the activities that are the highest, the most important, the ones where you're most alive, the ones that I like to call, practically speaking, times of plenitude. They have this great richness to them. They're where you most can say, this is what life is about. That's what we call leisure. The term leisure now has come to mean anything when you're not working. So if we may linger here for a moment, because frankly, this is key. Light bulbs go off here when I make this presentation because it says so much about the world in which we live. Aristotle distinguishes leisure and amusement. They are both distinct from work. When you're working, are you doing the work that's about producing something? Work is not for its own sake, but has great dignity in it, producing things that you need for life. When you're not working, okay, what are you doing? Well, for Aristotle in our Christian tradition, there's two levels. There's amusement, which we might just say is a kind of light diversion. You're running around as children, you're playing a fun game, you're riding down a roller coaster, you're telling a joke. I mean, amusement, it's a diversion, but it doesn't have the richness and depth. It has its place. There's a place for simple amusement. Amusement is distinct from work. But today, we've lost the sense of those higher, most important things in life. We don't have a sense of that richness. The highest example of leisure is worship. Worship is activity that's not about producing something for mercy's sake. It contains its end in itself. It's sought for its own sake. Contemplative activity is for its own sake, gazing upon the higher truths. Or just think of simple things, gazing in the presence of the beloved, gazing upon the beloved. It has its meaning in itself. This isn't work. Watching a sunset, stargazing. Someone wouldn't say, why are you doing that? That's not productive. That would be the worst of having completely lost a sense of the worthy in itself. This is why so many today, sidebar to help us see the importance of this and why it's so dramatic, who look upon a contemplative community of nuns and say, well, if they're not making fruitcakes, what are they doing? We truly have lost a sense of what's worthy in itself. So that home is the home of leisure. Home is where everybody from our earliest days of our life, we need to learn there's times of plenitude. They're the most important times of the day. And by God's command, there's Sunday, which is a day of rest, which means a day of leisure. So what we need to do is see there's aside from work, there's not just amusement. That's where we are today. Having lost the richer sense, it's just let's go on vacation. Let's do entertainment. Entertainment slash amusement, right? We're the entertainment culture. And when you're not entertaining yourself, you go back to work and then you go off and you entertain yourself. And that's what we do, so many do in their homes now. Either we're home from work or we're doing homework, working from home, or we're taking a nap, or we're watching television. We've lost those times of plenitude. That's going to be key to bringing life back to our homes.
It almost seems like we are training our brains for amusement as well, right? Like the just scrolling, watching all the short videos, the reels, the TikToks. I don't have TikTok, but that's just one that comes to my
Yeah,
mind,
yeah,
right? It's
sure.
just these things that are just for amusement, for distraction from everything else that's going on versus leisure that being in the present moment to just be and observe and
Hmm.
embrace and
Hmm.
imagine, let the Lord take over our imaginations and just see what he brings into the light. It's interesting that you mentioned the contemplative nuns because I'm sure if they were to do some sort of test, like those are the happiest people. They are so
Right.
happy because there is leisure. And I think you mentioned this in the book how we can create spaces like this, especially with family and with our children. I think it's the sitting around the dinner table and having conversations, asking each other questions, having story, or talking about the sunset. But those places where it's interaction and not distraction.
Hmm. Hmm. Well said. Which just points to in an intentional household, there will be these beautiful spaces in our day that we craft that will have that fullness of life where the ultimate purpose, what God's most made us for, will shine through and will kind of then overflow into the other spaces. To have the right sense of leisure, these are the people whose work has the most meaning and purposefulness. This is not some kind of laziness. I think of Alabama, the old country group, had a song, High Cotton, and there's a verse that says, When Sunday mornings rolled around, we dressed up in hand me downs just in time to gather with the church. Sometimes I think how long it's been, how I remember then it was the only day my daddy wouldn't work. There was a kind of intact culture there where Sunday, we're dressing up, we're worshiping the Lord, we're having picnics together, we're coming together as a community, we're coming together as a household. We don't work because we got something even more important than work to do. And that song doesn't imply that all the other days daddy did nothing but work. In each day, daddy and mom have to stop working. We all have to stop working. And one of the most beautiful opportunities for that, of course, is eating. Kind of when people say, well, if there's one, gosh, I feel a little overwhelmed. I like the picture you're painting, and where's one even begin? I always say the place to begin is your meals. Meals are custom designed by God to be the fruit of both good work and a context for true leisure. Good work goes into making it possible. You have to do some good work to clean up afterwards. But to some extent, in it, make it be a time of real presence, plenitude, interaction. And this will make all the difference. And according to the day, and then on Sunday, have it be ramp that up, just as on Christmas and Easter and feast days, you ramp that up. One of the main ways we mark those things is with how we eat. Our bodily needs are always a gift. They always point to God's plan. We need to eat several times a day. At times that's frustrating and it can drive a mother and a father crazy trying to meet it. It's relentless. It's relentless because God designed it to be relentless as a relentless opportunity for real life in simple, ordinary ways.
There was a time, I think it was actually just this last fall, and it was busy, and I remember my spiritual director randomly asking me, "How often do you guys eat dinner as a family?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a tough question at this season because my children's school is a half hour from where we live, and they each had soccer or volleyball on a different night of the week. So we didn't have time to drive home from school. A lot of times we were eating dinner in the car, and I was like, okay, at the dinner table isn't always happening, but are we still making this
Mhm.
work?" And so we were just having that discussion. Again, it goes back to the intentionality of me packing the coolers during the day, prepping all the food, which is anyone who does this, it is an act of love because it's a lot. And
Totally.
then how are we having those meals? And so it's the kids and I in the car, and my husband's not always there, but having the interactions and the conversations. It's that prayer time at night where all of us are together and we share what we call them our thank you gods, what we're thankful for in the day, then what we're praying for. And so as I was reading your book, it just reminded me of that this past fall. And even looking at our summer schedule of how often have we sat at the dinner table lately when we're eating our meals. And so last night, even though my husband wasn't home, I finished the kids' food. Theirs was done before mine because I have food allergies. I have to cook something different for me.
Mm,
And I was like, okay, you know what? Go sit at the dinner table. I'll be in a minute. And while they were waiting for me, I was like, I want you to think of some questions to ask. We're just going to take turns going around the dinner table, asking each other questions, and they came up with crazy fun things. It's incredible how much you can learn about someone even though you've spent so much time together with them.
yes. Yeah. That's great. That's great. I mean, this is the stuff that matters. And it's so easy from its kind of ordinariness slash it can start to have a drudgery aspect. And we need to rediscover the extraordinary in the ordinary. It sounds like a throwaway line, but this is where our children learn who they are. It's where they learn what's most important. It's where they learn they have something to say. It's where they learn that they will always be heard. So it's going to look different in different households, but there are certain patterns. So, Kylie, you're saying sports are a tricky thing. We are there this very day. I say to you that my last son at home has soccer camp from 5 to 7, and I'm just like, okay,
Right.
it just all right. We'll have to figure this one out. And he loves soccer, and he's going to play soccer. We've made that judgment, but the intentionality requires. It's so easy. I always say to people, no one's going to do it for you. No one is going to prioritize the kind of ordinary activities that are the context for you to really be present to one another, be together in those richer ways. It might not seem like a ton is happening, but the most important things that happen in people's lives are generally happening in those times that we are striving our best to carve out, not perfectly, not having as much time perhaps. But if sports make it so that you're not able to be having that dinner together, as you said, you're going to need to pivot. You can't just let it drop. It might take first saying, all right, are we sure we're not doing too much? Right. I mean, sometimes we do have to just ask some of those hard, have we let our children get into sports that maybe a little bit too much? Have we, whatever, those questions need to be asked. And then if we're not able to do X and Y, then we're going to have to build in A and B to somehow attend to those rich needs. That's why these principles they are flexible, but they are demanding. The need for good work together in the home, even when dad is busy and is at his profession out there and he comes home, these are challenging days. Sometimes I find myself saying to dads, hey, look, I'm sorry to put it this way, but I'm going to up the ante. If you got that profession out there that's really demanding a ton of you and it's really taking it out of you and you just don't feel like you have the energy to do something at home where you're going to do that project with the children, okay, I hear you. We might not be able to pivot on that right now, change that right now, but you know what? You might not be able to go play golf with your buddies. Well, I need it for my sanity. Okay, look, everyone's gonna have to be prudent. I don't want you to go insane. What you have to have for your what if I have to have it for my sanity? Well, the question is self-answering. If you truly have to have it for your sanity, then you're gonna have to do it because we don't want you to go insane. But what might we have to give up for our spouse, for our children? We're not gonna get this time back. And I talk to these children, and things that are missed are things that are missed. And this isn't about, again, self flagellation, but we got to be on it. We were made for this. An intentional household is recognizing we have a short time to live in the presence, to dwell joyfully in the presence, to have our children feel like, show me a child who feels like, especially his dad loves being with him. I'll show you a boy who knows who he is. And when he goes out in the world, he's going to stand tall because his daddy loved being with him. But daddies, we can't just feel it in our heart. Well, I'm over here doing all this work. I wish I could be with him. They can't feel that wish. Or at least, I'll change that. Maybe they can in some way. But the reality is, it has to be incarnated. It has to be infleshed. The normal activities of home are where is infleshed. How many husbands make this mistake with our wives? What do you mean you don't feel like I love you? I love you so much. This is a life lesson, especially men have to learn. You have to show the signs. You have to incarnate it. And that's what the household is designed to give you the opportunity to do if we're willing to follow the plan.
I'm so glad you stated that because I think that is huge. It can't just be and I am the worst about this, not necessarily with things with my kids or my husband, but it's like the queen of good intentions. I have all these great ideas in my head and the follow through isn't always sometimes fantastic. And so it's that we have to have that follow through piece that is so important. I just want to highlight two things because I know we're running short on time, but I want people who are interested in this book to go check it out. We've talked a lot about the family dynamic and having kids at home, but you also reference in the book intentional households is not just for people who are in this state of life. It is for the people who are widows or who have children who have moved out of the home, which unfortunately, there are so many people I know who are estranged from their children and they can still go back to this foundation of restoring relationship and having an intentional household. And so I just want to say don't lose hope or feel bad that this is not maybe the way that it looked like when your kids were young. You can still restore your household. You can still be intentional. You can still grow in a lot of these concepts. But it does take your yes. For all of us, we have to have that yes. And I also want to encourage and I'll give you a chance to talk on this too. But one other concept that you talk about in your book that I think is really powerful is this shift that we have in our modern culture in resisting multi-generational households and the importance of the elderly and our children having interactions with grandparents, or if it's not grandparents, just different generations and the conversations
Mhm.
that happen.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, thank you for saying that. Even I recent college graduates, 3 women living together. See the place that you're living more as a household. It's not a household in the full sense, but you should be thinking that that kind of family household is a kind of archetype that we image in various ways. Or in the case of those just out of college, maybe they're preparing for it. How can we make our home, our household, even when it's not a family, a place of rich life? How about the empty nest? Even if estranged from children, it is what we need if we continue to make our household be the place that would be warm and welcoming. Were our children to come back, they will find literally the home fire burning. And this is good for us too. And even if it's just a household of one, even the widow, the widower, the person who never got married, homes are always about generosity. The most obvious instance of that is generosity towards children. There's a way of having a household through hospitality. All households should be hospitable, practice hospitality to be being generous beyond their own borders to others. Every household can be this way to the weak, to the sick, just to your friends and relatives. Make home a place where we set the table. We have a special meal. There's always a place for you. There's a story to be told. There's a game to be played. There's a song to be sung. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how life, if we put first things first, all of us, according to our state in life, can have the place that we live be a household like that. And when we had more time to talk about that other generation, God's plan for the elderly, can we rediscover the changes in them are always part of his gift? The way they need us is a context for us discovering how we need them. God's plan is always better than we've yet discovered. And we have bad practices. We need to have good self knowledge. Our culture is not helping us in this. No one's going to do it for us. We're going to have to rediscover the gift of the elderly. Can we have them live with us if fitting? Because home is the natural place for people to die. But that's not going to work. How else are we going to integrate them? That's what the last principle in the book is about.
John, where can everyone find your book, The Intentional Household?
Good news is it's from Ignatius Press, so it's at ignatius.com, it's at Amazon, it's in bookstores, it's most everywhere. So thank you for asking that.
And you and your wife have a podcast as well. Do you want to share that?
We have a website, Lifecraft. It's life-craft.org. The podcast, which is one of the main things we do there, is called The Intentional Household. We had that before the book, and we just constantly are sharing the conversations that we are always having in our household, trying to figure out these things, trying to understand the principles, trying to figure out how to apply them. I have other things there at the websites too. I have free courses, one called Man of the Household, one called Woman of the Household. Can be taken anytime on demand, trying to bring the things I've been blessed to see in the philosophical tradition to anyone that it might help.
John, thank you so much just for this open conversation, for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge. It's been such a blessing. Do you have a prayer tip or scripture verse that you would like to share with us to close us out?
Thanks for asking that. Often, and I have to admit, it tends to be after the harder days. My wife and I are just, we are in bed and we say from Philippians, have no anxiety about anything, but in everything, with prayers and supplications, with thanksgiving, give thanks to the Lord. And I'll make it right at the end there. I say it almost every night. It was close. Why do I love it? In everything with thanksgiving. The thing we're constantly trying to remind ourselves is it's all about gratitude. So we try to memorize, even if sometimes we forget these lines, and we say them to one another, not as a challenge, but at those moments, particularly we're starting out with that one, have no anxiety about anything, but in everything with prayers and supplication. Let your requests be made known to God. So that was getting it right there. Let your requests be made known, to God, but with thanksgiving and no anxiety.
Yes, that's such a good one. And it's so beautiful that you do that every night or most nights. And that's Philippians 4 5. I know that one well because it is one I think I have to live by and recall to mind often. So, for anyone who doesn't know that scripture, Philippians 4, 5 through 7, if you want to finish it out, is really beautiful. Thank you so much, John, for that, for ending our time together, and just for all of the work that you continue to do. I pray that God will bless you and your family fully.
And you too. Thanks so much, Kylie.
Beautiful souls, thank you again for journeying with me. If you have been blessed by this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your social media stories, and don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Kylie M. Hine. Stay persistent in prayer, protect your peace, and as always, share the light of Christ with everyone around you.